there, everyone. Welcome back to our Ask the Attorney segment. This is our 13th segment. Hard to believe. Seems like just yesterday we were doing our first segment. But in case you're new here, I am Maya Engel. I am the evening anchor here at Up North Live News, live in our digital studio, joined by Ann Wehr. She is our go-to attorney. She is an estate planning attorney for Great Lakes Center for Estate Planning. Ann, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well.
Good.
Enjoying the early spring, I have to admit. A little cold.
Yep, I know. It's been pretty nice. I will agree with you on that one. And we're approaching St. Patty's Day. It is this Sunday, and so our theme today is kind of centered around that. Is that correct?
It definitely is. It definitely is. Don't leave your legacy to luck, right? For St. Patty's Day. Mm-hmm. Ironically, we're doing this on the 13th of the month. If anyone is superstitious about the 13th, we're talking about don't leave something to luck, right?
Because right. Well, it's our 13th segment on the 14th.
Oh, our 13th segment. Thank you for correcting that. Yeah, I knew 13 was in the number somewhere.
13 somewhere, yep. Yeah. So before we get into more about this topic, I do just want to remind all of our viewers watching that if you have any questions for Ann, not just about this specific topic, but really about anything estate planning or just any questions at all, you can leave them in the comments below and we will take some time to answer those questions. But so Ann, sounds like today we're going to be talking a lot about different myths and misconceptions when it comes to estate planning. And I know there are quite a few.
There are. And that's what we're going to talk about, because I thought that kind of went right in with don't let this just your luck, leave it to your luck. So and there's a lot of myths and misconceptions. So we're going to talk about some reasons why people don't do estate planning at least early enough. Mm-hmm. And I just think that it's a really interesting topic to chat about. And I guess don't leave it to your luck. I have to. So my hairstylist told me a joke the other day, which it was like, what did the cat say to the octopus who had a knife in every hand? Like, pretend there's a hand in every.
Yeah.
You're one short. You're one short. So the octopus has 8 legs, and the cat has 9 lives.
Right.
So the cat was definitely saying, he won't get me twice with one of those. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I like lame jokes, and that's a pretty lame one.
So you mentioned a lot of people do tend to kind of put off an estate plan, making an estate plan. That is not a misconception. It is easy to procrastinate.
It is easy to procrastinate. That is not a myth. That is not a misconception. I find when I talk with clients that estate planning has been high on their list for a long period of time. They've thought, I need to get that plan done. I need to get it done. But it's always something that's easy to put off. Sometimes it's, you just kind of get in the routine of your life, and it's nothing that you stop for. But it does bring forward some, cliches, I guess, is there is no promise of tomorrow. We all know that, but that's not how we live. Thank goodness we live, our lives. And, as Benjamin Franklin said, don't put off until tomorrow that what you can do today. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that really speaks to estate planning, because it's very, very important. And so tonight I hope to address some of those myths and misconceptions that lead people to procrastination. And I think after this is our 13th session, Maya, I think you probably have a pretty good idea of what some of those myths and misconceptions are.
Yes, and I know I have already asked you some of these questions just because coming into this segment, I really didn't know a lot about estate planning. So I've asked you a lot about these myths. And one question I asked you before is estate planning only for the elderly?
And that is a common misconception, right? Mm-hmm. So people think, well, I'm not old enough yet. I'm not old enough to worry about estate planning. I'll worry about that when I'm, I guess, one day closer to death. Yeah. So, and all of us are, luckily, we generally live pretty optimistically. I'm not thinking I'm going to die any moment soon. And so they really believe that estate planning is something that they don't need to worry about. We'll put it off until we're older. And they know that unexpected accidents happen, illnesses, and that can happen at any age. but it's just easy, so you have to remember too that estate planning isn't just for your death. It's a big part of it, distributing your assets upon your death, but it also helps you during life. So we've talked about some really important key topics. The healthcare power of attorney and we talked about how that helps a person who, it could just be a short-term illness. You might have been in a car accident, but you're going to recover just fine. But for a while, you can't make your own decisions. This identifies a person who can step in legally and help make those decisions. And hospitals love that because they know who they have a go-to, and they're not worried about, what it is that they should be doing. A hospital will always, I think Stephanie Van Slyke told us, they will always go towards saving your life. That's not the decision they're making. But when it comes to additional care, and then the other document is the financial power of attorney. So you might need somebody to use your checkbook to write your rent, to pay your rent, your utilities, other key items you may well have the money for. But if someone can't write your checks, then you could fall behind. So those are a couple of items that if you don't have a healthcare power of attorney or a financial power of attorney, your loved ones have to petition the court to become a guardian or a conservator. And the last I knew, it can take up to 16 weeks to get on the court's docket. They're just so busy, the probate court. Now, don't quote me on that. I might be a little wrong, but that was what I was hearing not long ago. So it's better to choose your own healthcare agent and choose your own financial agent anyway than to have a court identify someone that you maybe don't know to take care of you. So you've chosen the people that you trust. And it's really a great relief to your family at that time too, because imagine the turmoil they're going through if you've been injured and you need some support in those areas. And this brings me to get back to my personal story. I believe many in the audience know that my husband and I lost our son. He was in the prime of his life. He was 33 years old, strong as an ox, and he was just starting his family. He was a firefighter and a paramedic. And you absolutely knew when this guy was in the room. He did not shy away. He had all kinds of confidence. In fact, he was confident. He was stubborn, and he was funny. He was a great storyteller, and he was loved by so many. And on Christmas Eve, he was called home. His wife was 7 weeks pregnant with their first child. And who would have thought he needed an estate plan? But since I've joined the club of parents who have lost children, a club that no one wants to be a member of, I have really met so many people who have lost children in the prime of their life. So it does happen. We just don't like the idea that it happens. But so those are just some warnings that we need estate plans at all ages, not just when you're elderly.
Because again, you really just never know.
You just don't know. You just don't know.
Well, thanks again, Marianne, for sharing your personal story.
You're welcome. I want everyone to know that is what brought me into estate planning, was my personal story, the experiences my family went through, my daughter-in-law especially, after his death. And I'll talk about it a little bit more, I think, tonight, but I won't dwell on it. But it really it was a great learning for me that a person can be in service to other families, even through being a lawyer, right? Mm-hmm. So I serve this in this way, and this is it is really a practice area that feeds my soul. I am able to help people through difficult decisions, and you wouldn't believe how people walk out of my office just with air under their feet, so they feel good about what they've done, and it makes me feel good.
Sure. That is certainly not a myth. No misconception there.
There is no myth there. That's perfectly authentic.
Yeah. Well, another common myth when it comes to estate planning is, does one need to be wealthy to need an estate plan?
So many people, and I think the term estate estate means to people, some huge piece of property with, many houses and that's really not what it's intended to mean. But I think that's why people think I'm not wealthy enough. I don't have enough. I don't have to worry about it. But this is a question that I'm going to bring back to my son again. He was a paramedic and a firefighter. And he was too young to have accumulated much wealth. But my 27-year-old daughter-in-law found herself all wrapped up in the probate court. And she had just after the death of her husband, she had deadlines to meet, people to give notices to, inventories that needed to be provided to the court by certain deadlines. And she was grieving. She was grieving the loss of her husband. And the probate process stole her opportunity to grieve. She had so many changes going on in her life. The loss of James. She was pregnant with her first child. So she was going through a pregnancy without her soulmate. And she was tugged and pulled by a court process that she knew nothing about. Nobody had ever mentioned probate to her in her life. So even though it was an uncontested probate, no one was arguing that, who the owner of his property should be. It took 7 months. So it took her longer than one would expect. It took 7 months. And that's when something's uncontested and simple. He didn't have a lot, but he had a house. And so, if except for it would make her relive those times of her life, she would be a great person to have with us and talk about her, the perils, what she went through, but I would never put her through that.
Right.
So, but that's just pointing out that he was not wealthy and he should have had an estate plan or someone look at how his assets were titled or give him some help, and she wouldn't have gone through that.
Sure. It kind of just ties in both of our first two myths is you don't need to be old and you don't need to be wealthy to have an estate plan.
That's exactly correct. And that is, so I really think that we almost think about that when we think about a will. Oh, I'm not old enough. Or I think about, and a trust sounds like I need to be really wealthy for a trust. And none of it's true. You just need the support of a good lawyer who's going to listen to you and create something that fits your needs.
Sure. So I am sure those are probably two of the biggest myths, but there are quite a few others out there. So we did get a question from Rose, and Rose is wondering, why wouldn't that just go to his wife instead of going through probate court?
It's a really good question because most of the time it would just go to his wife. Usually married people buy their houses together. And when they do, it's owned jointly and with right to survivorship. So when the first person dies, it just goes to the second person, whether wife or husband. In James's case, son's case, he bought his house before he was married. So his property was titled only in his name. And I think I remember in an offhanded way saying to him, well, we should probably get your deed updated so that Kayla's on the deed. But that was it. I mean, he was 33 years old. And so that's why it did not just go to his wife easily. It had to go through the probate process because he owned it solely.
Right. So that kind of plays into another myth that some people believe that family will just handle everything without a plan.
That's right. That's right. Because in normal everyday times, many people have a family that they just come together and solve challenging moments. And that's who they are and what they do. And, but from my own experiences and seeing others go through this, when a cherished loved one dies, if there's not clear instruction in place, there can be confusion, disagreements, legal hurdles, just all kinds of things that come up that wouldn't without the death. So an estate plan provides the clarity and guidance during the difficult time. It's like you are there. The person who has died is actually there, still being a shoulder to lean on. really the peacekeeper and the negotiator, because they've done the planning and they've made the decisions. People don't need to make the decisions over again. And I honestly will tell you that your family will be so thankful that you've created a rule book for them to follow, um, because they know your wishes. And again, they're used to leaning on sage advice, whether you think they are or they're not. They're going to miss you. And so it's hard to feel, the feeling of loss causes people to act differently. It creates anxiety. I know shortly after the loss of my son, I'm sure I said and did things that were so out of character, but I was having so much, it was just difficult. And it's difficult for everyone. Everyone goes through grieving a little bit differently at a little different pace. And one person might not understand how another is, and it can cause a disagreement. And sometimes these disagreements aren't short term. Sometimes they trigger kind of angst and frustration that last, if not a lifetime, for a long time. So having a plan and not relying on people to come together and build that plan at the point of your death is really a gift to them. So that's what I would say, is that someone who's not making an estate plan because they think, yeah, my family's just going to figure it all out. Well, they're going to have to figure it out through the court process with probate. Well, everything that's thrown at them in that way, it's going to cost them some more money, because you've got to pay a little bit to a lawyer, you got to pay a little bit to the court, and it's just prolonged. Like I pointed out, my daughter-in-law, absolutely uncontested, the simplest possible probate, 7 months. Yep.
And like you said earlier, going through this process, well, then also grieving, like that is a lot for a person to deal with.
It is a lot for a person to deal with. And people, there is grief no matter the circumstance of the death. There is grief. Even if you think, I'm expecting my older parent to die one day soon, when it actually happens, there is just no manual. There's no time frame, and it's just no fun. I mean, period. It's just no fun. So that can, relying upon your family to do the right thing is probably not the right plan.
And here's a question I'm sure a lot of people are wondering or have wondered at some point in their life before making an estate plan. Is estate planning complicated?
Yes. I think that also keeps people away, right? What do I have to do? I have to meet a lawyer. Really? I don't want to, so I'm not sure that people think that badly, but it's just complicated. It takes time out of their life. And so they do stay away from it because it feels too complicated. But it does involve complex legal concepts, but that's what a lawyer will help boil it down. If you come into my office, I'm not going to talk to you about the legal concepts. I'm going to ask questions that are going to tell me what you want. And then I'm going to present you with a few solutions and tell you why this might work or that might work. But I'm not going to be talking about the trust code or the probate code. I promise you not to speak in terms of law. And when you find a lawyer that you truly trust, the process is really easily simplified. It's never real simple. There are decisions that you have to make that aren't simple, but when you work with a really an experienced estate planning attorney, it's more manageable, and it will help you tailor your plan, because you can get so complex with plans that most people don't need. It helps you tailor your plan to what it is that your specific needs are. And like I said earlier, I've seen people, sometimes I feel like they're coming into my office and both, both of the people are like, we're here because we need to do this. And then once I work with them, then they start to, you can kind of see them, sitting up straighter, feeling better about themselves. And when they've signed it to a person, they'll just say, oh, it feels so good. I can now just be, relax. And so I know helping people. I call it the rule book. This is your rule book. This is what you want with your assets, and helping people write their rule book. And they know that they've just taken strides to solidify and simplify things for their family and not leave it to the family. You can just see just weight lifting off their shoulders. So yeah, it feels complicated, but believe me, I think carrying the burden of knowing you should be doing this is heavier than working through the complications. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks from the first a day that you come in to visit me. You'll have engaged with me a week or so before. I'm going to ask you to give me some information, and then when we meet, it's going to take about 4 to 6 weeks between our meeting and the completion of the signing process. And during that time, there will be a few questions, but for the most part, I'll get what it is that you want out of a couple of meetings. So it's not like something that drags on, or you're interrupted day in and day out. Oh, that lawyer wanted to now know this, and I didn't know the answer to that. I pretty much get everything all in one spot. And then after the 6 weeks, I will make sure that once it's signed, whether it's 4 or 6 weeks, I'll make sure that your plan is funded. Remember, we talked about funding the trust. Make sure your plan is trust funded. I can't get that straight, can I?
I know, I messed that up too.
And then we'll stay in contact over the course of keep a long relationship. So if any little nit or nat needs to change, it can. I think I've talked before. Sometimes key people in your plan now move to the other side of the country, and so it doesn't make as much sense for them to be that person. So it's easy to make that change, but you just have to keep in touch with me. So, yeah, complicated made simple, and burden lifted is how I can explain it.
So this next myth or misconception is something that we have talked about in previous sessions, and that is once someone creates an estate plan, they're done, right?
Right. And that's a myth. Yeah. So, and I think many years ago, that's how people felt. Like they did a will, maybe a couple of documents. And I have people that come in and say, well, this is like, 30 years old. Probably you should look at it. Huh? And you get busy in your life and you've got the plan done. But your assets grow, your life grows and changes. And sometimes a will might name an ex-wife as your primary beneficiary. So it is important to keep up with it. I like to just touch bases with my clients once a year. How are things going? Any changes? Doesn't have to be a long, involved conversation. But if there's changes or they've got questions, we can make them. And so in that way, the plan will always work. It's not like, oh dear, 5 years ago this would have worked and now it won't. So I think we've talked about, I do things, my firm does things a little bit differently than some. I have a client care package that is like very, very expensive, that you can call me anytime, email me anytime. I'll make these little changes, keep it up to date for any legal changes, and we'll go from there. My real goal is, I believe that when you've agreed to have an estate plan done with me, I have shared with you the value of it. And to me, I've made a promise. So if you've chosen to use a revocable living trust because you want to avoid probate, I believe I've made the promise to you that we're going to do everything we can to avoid probate. So the only way I can really keep that promise is by keeping up with you and keeping the estate plan updated. So it's not a one and done thing. You don't put it on the shelf after you're done, but you can feel good and you don't have to think about it every day. It's not you've made the major decisions and just move on with it. But that's how I handle it in my practice.
Right. So Is estate planning only about what happens after someone dies?
Right. No, it's not. That's a big part of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's a big part of it is to distribute your assets in the most simplified manner that, or the manner that fits your family best. Very often people come to me and they're like, I just want it simple for my kids. You know, um, they're good kids. I trust them. We're gonna, I just want to do the simplest way possible to make it easy for them. So, so that's where I almost think I forgot the question. I started wandering, but
Is We'll circle back, don't worry. Is estate planning all about what happens after someone
oh
dies?
no, yeah. So big part of it. I already said that.
Yep.
But then earlier in our conversation, I talked about the healthcare power of attorney, the financial power of attorney, and those are documents that are that are only good during your life and save your family from having to go to the probate court to get a conservatorship or a guardian.
Mhm.
So no, it keeps everything running smoothly in your life, and we're of course we're talking about when the chips are down.
Right.
So yeah.
And a last thing that some people probably are wondering, or again have wondered at some point, is can they just do an estate plan themselves?
Right.
DIY, DIY estate plan.
DIY estate plan, and they're out there, right? I mean, there's online estate plans. You can create. I've never really looked at the documents, and but they may not adequately address your specific needs. It just depends on your circumstances. But hard because I'm an estate planning attorney. I really, really do believe that the work that I bring, or the knowledge and background that I bring, helps create a very workable rule book, if you will. So, working with an experienced estate planning lawyer will really meet your goals and protect your interest. And all I can think of, when I was thinking about tonight, I was thinking, a few years ago, my husband had a knee replacement. And I didn't want him to say he was gonna do it himself. Oh, I'll just go into the bathroom and I'll put a new knee and I'll be back. That didn't happen. It wasn't
Ordering a knee online.
I'm gonna YouTube it. I'm gonna find out how to do a knee replacement, and I'm just gonna do it because I'm not spending time in the hospital. So, no, he didn't do that. And, a lawyer has a very specific skill. I can't replace knees either, but, um, but I just wouldn't, I wouldn't have thought of that. But I thought about him in his knee, and I'm sure he procrastinated it until there was just no choice. He could barely walk, right? That's when he finally had his knee replaced. And that's a common story. But unfortunately, you need to meet me before you need the estate plan in the end, right? Because where he could hobble in to the hospital and have his knee replaced, once you're gone, once you leave this earth, you really can't knock on the attorney's door and float down a
Right.
here's the bill. So anyway, I don't advocate DIY because we think we've talked in the past. There's just such a intersection of so many different laws, and if you're at all, even having a 401k is a complex thing. So, I don't, just like my husband didn't want to replace his knee all by himself.
Right. It's a good comparison. All right. Well, those are definitely some of, I would say, the most common myths and misconceptions about estate planning. So hopefully that really cleared things up for some people out there who had some questions about the overall process of estate planning. And if you do have any other questions or want to contact Marianne, I do have her contact information in the comments below. You can go to her website or you can give her a phone call. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us today for our 13th Ask the Attorney segment. We do meet every other Thursday. So if you have any questions at all, I know I say this every week, a couple times a segment, it might be a little repetitive, but please do not hesitate to reach out with your questions. you can always, like I said, comment live, or you can email our newsroom, and that email is just newsroom@upnorthlive.com, and we will always take time to answer your questions. So
Exactly.
Marianne, thanks. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to add to that. I had a person call today, saw my ad on TV, and I talked to him for quite a while. He had a lot of questions, and I don't mind answering questions. I really do like education. So feel free to call me as well. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Marianne, for always providing such important information, and for, again, just sharing your story. I know it's
You're welcome.
not an easy thing to talk about, but
It's not easy, but I just think sometimes you need a real hardcore example, and to know that this is coming from a place of difficult experience. I'm not just talking about how hard grieving is, because I've heard that it's difficult, so anyway, for what it's worth, I think we've got to go now.
Yeah. Well, we will see you next time on Ask the Attorney. So that will be, let me figure out the date here really quick. That'll be Thursday, March 28th.
Okay.
And we'll see you all then. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.